Hello, everyone, and welcome to our expert Q&A webcast, the last of 2022, brought to you by Amneal and Kyowa Kirin. We're very excited to have a special holiday webcast for you today with Dr. Mike Braitsch, also known as Dr. Mike, from Tribe Wellness LLC. And today he's going to talk to us about yoga, Tai Chi, and Qi Gong, and their benefits for people with Parkinson's before demonstrating some of the movements that you can try at home. Dr. Mike also runs online classes at Tribe Wellness LLC, so hopefully you will be inspired today to join some classes, maybe as you head into the holidays or after the new year. But this is going to be a very exciting webcast. It will also be recorded and available at briangrant.org/webcast later this week. Again, we're so excited to have Dr. Mike on with us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mike.
Well, thank you, Katrina. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dr. Mike Braitsch. I'm a physical therapist at Tribe Wellness in Dallas, Texas. And I'm excited also because we've talked about this in the past. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, watching Brian Grant play at the Cincinnati Garden where I went to undergrad also, Xavier University, home of the Musketeers. And who knew that all these years later, our paths would cross again. We met here in Dallas a few years ago at a boxing fundraising event, and Brian shared his story with a lot of folks. Here in Dallas at Tribe Wellness, I get to do a lot of really cool things, some of which is one-on-one physical therapy, primarily with people who have Parkinson's disease and other forms of Parkinsonism. And then we also run a bunch of evidence-based group exercise programs to help people with Parkinson's disease do more when they finish therapy. And the thinking there, and the reason we call it Tribe Wellness, is it's about a group of people. We know that exercise is medicine. We know for people with Parkinson's disease, it's even more important than it is for people without Parkinson's to exercise. We know exercise is the only thing that slows the progression of symptoms. And so participating in a group really makes it easier to be consistent, which tends to be the key to success. So my hope today is we'll jump in through some slides. I'll try to keep that pretty quickly because I think talking about this stuff is okay, but doing this stuff is way more fun. So hopefully the majority of our time today is in the doing. And, we'll work from there. I should also note, too, the topics we're covering, yoga, Tai Chi, Qi Gong, these are three areas that are incredible and accessible to a lot of people. But also, if it seems like I'm glossing over some of this or oversimplifying some of it, I might be on some aspects because you could spend an entire lifetime in one of these practices and still not feel like you're a true master. So, I've been practicing yoga for many years. I've been doing martial arts most of my life. I've been teaching Tai Chi for over 10 years now, and Tai Chi for people with Parkinson's since I started Tribe Wellness, which was back at the beginning of 2017. So coming up on 6 years. On top of that, just put some credentials down there to show you this isn't just stuff that I came up with based on my opinion. I've got a lot of relevant experience. Got some published research on things like our non-contact boxing program. There's already a lot of really well-organized and well-designed research that's out there specific to Parkinson's disease and Tai Chi and Qi Gong and yoga also. So as we head into it, though, what I want to make sure is you don't forget the absolute basics. And, a lot of times when I'm doing presentations like this, or when I'm talking to people who are maybe newly diagnosed or new to taking care of their symptoms with exercise, or maybe getting back into a routine of exercise, it's just so easy to get caught up in what's the best thing to do, which is going to give me the most bang for my buck. And the research out there is really clear on one thing, which is any exercise is helpful and any physical activity is helpful that you do safely. And that's the PT in me speaking, that you do safely. But the other thing is it's all about consistency. And there was a great research article that came out earlier this year in the Journal of Neurology that looked at people from diagnosis to 6 years or so out and looked at their scores on a rating scale that's common in the field of movement disorders, UPDRS. Section 3 of it's the motor scale. That might be more than you ever needed to know, but that's the one where if you're with your neurologist, you're doing this deal, they're tugging you from behind to see how you react to your balance, and they're looking at walking and all kinds of things like that. And what was found for the first time with actual human beings is what we've always thought, which is if you exercise, you do better. And that's true because every system in your body works better. Your circulation is certainly improved. Your cerebral blood flow to the brain is improved, which brings with it nutrition to the brain, oxygenation to the brain that makes the brain more excitable, which makes it easier to move and easier to participate in motor learning. But what they found is people who did at least 150 minutes a week fared worlds better than those who didn't. People who were doing 150 minutes a week of physical activity. And from that, the people who did even more and targeted 300 minutes were faring even better than that. So you might say, well, that's great and everything, but I'm not there yet. I'm working my way up to it, and that's fine. As long as you got a goal, you got something you can measure and work towards. Or if you say, gosh, I really would like to come up with some resources. You know, I shared a slide a moment ago here, which is recommendations that the Parkinson Foundation came up with in partnership with the ACSM, a personal training certification organization, the American College of Sports Medicine. But also, I'm here to remind you, briangrant.org is your home for a ton of great resources when it comes to coming up with a plan to exercise. And certainly, there are a lot of PTs like me throughout the country who'd be happy to work with you too. Physical therapists, we've got a whole lot of training that we love to share. And the group exercise programs, the types of exercise we're jumping into now, I'm going to give you some basic background on each of these. And I need you to know not every PT is going to be well-versed in a lot of these things. I'm just completing 200-hour registered yoga teacher training, which is outside of a PT curriculum. And teaching Tai Chi for a decade and still continuing to learn from my teachers is something I'm fortunate to do. And it's so crazy because I can tell you from experience, there are times where I think I've really figured something out, and then many months later, there's a whole new layer to it or a whole new level to it. And that's one of the things that I think is so great about what we're talking about today, mindfulness-based exercise. So if we're getting into yoga, you probably know yoga is very popular, and it has its roots as a practice from India. And all of these mindfulness-based forms of exercise have a few common themes. One of them is a heavy emphasis or rooting in philosophy, with even in a lot of cases a spiritual approach to it or aspect. And that can mean a lot of different things to different people. And my hope is that never scares people away, because the concepts that are talked about in these three practices really align with every organized religion. Or even if you're somebody who says, I don't have anything to do with religion, I don't want to hear about it, that's okay too, because we can all agree that mindfulness really is an intense focus on the present moment. And all the great mystics talk about how that's the key to freedom and success and happiness. But there are plenty of people who have no religious affiliation whatsoever who say, gosh, if my mind's not jumping off into the future, my to-do lists or whatever, or racing off into the past, thinking about how something should have gone or what I should have done differently or said, if I can just stay grounded in right now, things go better. And my experience with people with Parkinson's disease is that's even more true, because all of these forms of exercise can help you, first and foremost, lower your level of stress. And we know that Parkinson's disease, more than so many other conditions, is like the poster child for the mind-body connection. And people I work with all the time say it this way. They usually say something like, well, you know, Mike, when I'm stressed, my symptoms feel a little bit worse. Or some of them say, if I've got a tremor, I notice it more when I'm stressed out. Or some people say, you know, I don't have a tremor, but my main problem is dystonia, stiffness in my muscles. And I feel even more stiff and rigid when I've got a new mental stress, or even new physical stress, which might mean, you know, if you get a cold, or you have an injury and you've got some pain, those things can flare up your levels of stress, which can in turn flare up the intensity of your Parkinson's symptoms over the short term. And these mindfulness-based practices can help you reconnect with the present moment, lower that stress level to improve function, which then maybe lowers the stress level a little bit more. So I think there are a lot of tools here that help to put people back in control of a lot of their symptoms. Doesn't get rid of everything, but it sure is nice to have some control over things. So when we think about the physical aspects of practicing yoga, what happens? Well, yoga really emphasizes different postures and flowing into them. There are major styles of yoga, and depending on who you talk to, most people say about 5, but that's even debatable. But no matter which type of yoga you practice, this increased focus on postural awareness brings you more in control of this posture everyone's fighting from living life against gravity, that's even more accelerated by Parkinson's disease. And you know it, you've probably seen it, that rounded shoulder, forward head, flexed trunk position. When you've got more postural awareness, it's easier to use active control of your muscles to counteract that. And that realigns your center of gravity to help with balance. A whole bunch of things follow as a result of that. So in addition to that postural awareness and these techniques from yoga, breathing is key. And there are a lot of different types of breathing exercises in yoga. But the main approach is one that's also linked with stress reduction and similar to the other types of exercise we're getting into today, which is diaphragmatic breathing, using the diaphragm. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Usually when I ask somebody to take a deep breath, I see their shoulders puff up, and that's not engaging the diaphragm. Usually with a deep belly breath, when you try to imagine pulling the air down into your stomach and feeling your stomach expand outward as you inhale, that's when the diaphragm gets engaged, and that pulls a lining in your body down further, which allows the lungs more room to expand, that lets you breathe more deeply, which can be really helpful for a lot of things associated with Parkinson's disease, in addition to stress reduction. Because we know over time people get more stiff in their ribs and thoracic spine. We know that can, in later stages of Parkinson's disease, make it harder to have a productive cough. And so things like yoga or Tai Chi or Qi Gong or even just meditative breathing can be really helpful for keeping a productive cough in your life, which means if you get sick, there's less of a chance of aspiration, getting fluid that you choke on, which is very helpful to avoid. In addition to that, yoga, unlike these other forms of exercises, has an increased focus on spinal mobility and core stability, whereas Tai Chi and Qi Gong tend to focus more on balance and leg and hip mobility. So with yoga, there's a lot of stuff standing. There are also a lot of techniques that are done on the floor. As we start thinking about what is Tai Chi, well, yoga was from India, Tai Chi's from China. And Tai Chi also has a mindfulness-based component, also some spiritual history to it, and also just like yoga was originally taught for that, and unlike yoga, taught for self-defense too, being a martial art. But all of these have come into the limelight in the mainstream especially here in the West, because of their great exercise and health benefits. So again, it doesn't really matter why you practice. What matters is the consistent practice. And it's a form of action meditation, just like yoga is. Tai Chi is done in standing. We typically wear shoes for Tai Chi. There's slow and controlled movement. I've got a picture here of a group I teach that's open to the public at a park here in downtown Dallas called Clyde Warren Park. And it's a unique one because it's the most Dallas park you could imagine. It's on top of a highway. It has valet parking and a restaurant. And yet, it's a great place to get some exercise done. Tai Chi is a little different too, in that we're shifting weight a lot from one leg to the other, slow, smooth, focused movement. And there tend to be more, instead of a focus on spinal mobility, there tends to be more of a focus on harmony of hands moving at the same time, harmony of hands and footwork happening at the same time. And then that's coupled with harmony of weight shifting and breathing. So there's a whole lot to focus on. And over time, some people who I've had in class for years have said, maybe just now I'm starting to make sense of some Tai Chi techniques. But the cool thing is, whether you feel like you're mastering it or not, all the health benefits and all the real gifts for people with Parkinson's come from just doing it. Whether you feel like you're doing it well or not matters much less. When we think about Qi Gong is often taught with Tai Chi, oddly enough, and it has more of a background in traditional Chinese medicine. So it predates Tai Chi by how much. No one can give you a really clear factual answer that I'm aware of without a great debate. But the focus with Qi Gong is more on internal energy. And some people will say, well, hang on, we talk about energy, what does that mean? And for most people, we're talking about directing your focus to a region of the body. And for the traditional approach that falls within traditional Chinese medicine, when they think about energy, you're trying to stimulate different meridians that are linked to certain organs, kind of like you'd see on an acupuncture or acupressure chart. My experience in working with people with Parkinson's disease and with the general public is a lot of folks, maybe on higher levels, are interested in getting into the energy aspect, but mostly people just want a way to work out that's not going to flare up their joints, and all three of these will help to avoid that because they're low impact. Also, they're looking for ways to work on balance and coordination and flexibility. All three of these really embody those concepts. And sometimes they're looking for just a little bit of an escape from the stress of the present moment. I know if it wasn't for our Tai Chi group, life stresses probably would have taken me down into a mire of insanity over these last few years, and instead I get to have fun and feel useful. So a lot of that comes from just being rid of stress through practicing things like this. So all of these, we're going to use full body movements. All of these are gentle. All of these emphasize coordination. And if you're thinking about starting out one of these programs, I'd say a couple of general rules to follow. One, if it hurts, stop and let your instructor know, because usually there are modifications. All of these can be practiced even from a chair. A lot of it comes down to the interaction you have with whoever's running the class, whether they have special training in Parkinson's or not. Another key thing I'd say is, if you're curious, why not watch a class and see how the teacher handles things first and then jump in? So that way you're not taking on too much or heading into something that feels too basic for you. And outside of that, I'd say slower is better, because that requires an increased level of intentional focus and strength and control, which is a little bit different than a lot of forms of exercise that we do for people with Parkinson's. So I've said a lot. I've got in these slides that I think you'll have access to my contact info. If you want to try some of our classes, we got a lot of information on tribewellness.org, our website. There's my dog Boba. She might run out during this. And I've got a bunch of resources for you in these slides and research studies that I hope highlight what we're going to get into now. So I want to close down these slides and jump into some practice with you. And kind of like I just shared with you moments ago when we were talking about keys to success, I'm really hopeful as we do this stuff that you're safe at home. And I'm really hopeful that that means you're not going to take on any unnecessary risks and that you're practicing in a place that's free of clutter. But just a few simple things when it comes to something like yoga. We can start with yoga for a few minutes. Yoga traditionally has a lot of different flow. Usually there's a mat like this. I'm committing a cardinal sin right now in yoga because I'm wearing shoes. And most people don't. And that's probably a good thing, especially if you have a lot of toe curling and cramping. Practicing yoga without shoes can be really helpful to address that. There's one posture from yoga that I think has tremendous benefits for our crowd, people with Parkinson's disease. I want to show you a few today, but one of the simplest ones, you start out with your feet together at the base of your mat. And you can turn, I'm turning my right foot to the corner of the mat. And left foot, I'm just stepping forward. And this is one you've probably seen in any flyer for yoga, which is called Warrior Two. So we've got heels lined up with each other. And we can try to bring the arms out at shoulder height. We're bending the front leg. We're straightening the back leg. And we've got a nice gaze looking off beyond the front hand. One of the reasons I love this posture for people with Parkinson's disease is, again, that postural issue of rounded shoulders creates tight muscles in the chest. And here, you can accentuate this posture or elements of it to counteract that. You can squeeze those shoulder blades in towards each other. So we're getting some shoulder strengthening. We're getting some strengthening of muscles around the shoulder blades. And we squeeze those shoulder blades back and we can push the chest out even. And you can feel how that puts your shoulders in a better position than this rounded out posture that everybody's trying to avoid. I usually encourage people with Parkinson's disease to hold something like this posture for a couple of minutes a day on each side. And an easy way to do it, it's going to look rude because I'm going to turn my back to you now, but if you can do it facing a wall, a lot of folks are aware that one of the impairments with Parkinson's disease is that lack of postural control, postural instability. And so if you're leaning or if you have lost touch with upright posture, you notice it right away because you touched the wall. And so you've got one more tactile cue, something that's touching you that's saying, oh, quit leaning, get up tall, keep those shoulder blades back. If you want more of a leg strengthening challenge, you can sink lower into this. If you say, hey, that's a great idea, but my knees are aching, buddy, well, then you can stay up higher and you're still going to get a lot of benefits. So I know sometimes things like yoga can get kind of a bad name for people as we age, because a lot of times the marketing material you see at gyms and community centers is usually like some 20-something in a sports bra doing a standing split. And if you can do that, that's great. But as a PT, I'm more focused on function. So I want you to know, even if you can't get into that type of position, you can still benefit from yoga. Also, a thing I love about yoga is there's a lot of getting on the floor. And a lot of people I see are afraid of falling. which happens for good reason. It's a healthy fear to have, but also that means they're often afraid of getting down on the floor. And whenever you practice yoga and you get down onto the floor, that's one more rep getting down and getting up, which has a lot of functional benefit and takes a lot of strength, core control, hip mobility, spinal mobility. So it's a good move. And there are a few simple movements we can do on the floor. If you feel safe getting down here, you can join me. Otherwise, you might just hang in your chair for a moment or sit at the edge of your chair and fold forward. We're going to do a pose called child pose, where you sit back. You try to sit back, hips towards your heels, drop the chest down, and look up towards your fingertips. This is one that is so good for getting rid of some of that spinal stiffness that people feel. And the PT in me feels the need to remind you that static positions, things that you just hold still, aren't bad, but it's not as functional as moving. So in the clinic, I like to couple this posture, child pose, with a nice one where you shift forward, nice and slowly. You get those hands underneath your shoulders, you drop the hips, lower the chest down, and then peel up the chest into cobra. And it's one of those things where it doesn't matter if you can go way up high, or if you're somebody that's just holding it down low and that's all you've got. Just that action of trying to peel the chest up repeatedly is helpful for spinal mobility. And you can even shift in and out of this to get some great core activation, stretching of the shoulders, spinal mobility. So this is something at home that, if you wanted to try some yoga and you could get down on the floor to do it, it'd be really helpful to try it out for, maybe 10-second holds at each end. And if you go slower, you can really focus on if it feels like it's doing anything for you in terms of, where do I feel tight? Where do I feel stiff? That way you can really get moving. So that's one that I think is very helpful, going from child pose into cobra. A big warning I like to give people with yoga that have Parkinson's disease is, if you're somebody who gets lightheaded easily when you change positions, like standing up from sitting, you'll want to avoid any posture that involves, to use a yoga term, inversion. And that would be things like what I want to do next, which is down dog. Anything where your head is lower than your hips would be worth avoiding if you've got that problem of getting dizzy from changing positions. I know not everybody has it, but it's pretty common to have orthostatic hypotension is the term for it, where you get dizzy. And there's no sense in putting yourself in a position where you might pass out or get too dizzy. So if that's not a problem for you, which again is most people, heading into, well, not most, but a lot of people, heading into downward facing dog here is really helpful. And this is one where I've got the forefoot and the toes on the floor. I'm straightening out the legs and trying to push my rear end up towards the ceiling. And you can get your feet nice and wide to the edges of your mat. This is another one that's common in a lot of yoga classes and in a lot of flowing movements. People will shift forward and drop down slowly and peel up. There are a whole lot of different flows or sequences in yoga that involve downward facing dog. And my warning for you is, if you get dizzy, skip that one and find a substitute with your teacher. But if not, that's one where you can practice at home too. And if you've got a lot of cramping in your feet and curling in your toes, you can get some great benefit. Plus, in downward dog, you get a nice calf stretch. You can even Try to straighten those knees and get a nice hamstring stretch. You can rock your legs in and out of it to get a nice gentle stretch too, if it's too much for you to really hold it still. And you're getting some more stability of the shoulders through activating muscles around your shoulder blades. So that's another one. So first we did warrior two. Then we did child pose to cobra. Another common yoga position we just did was downward facing dog. I'm going to do one more and we're going to move on. This one is harder and it's wonderful. It's for some people, it's the right kind of torture. Okay. It's called thread the needle. We do this one in physical therapy all the time. And it's great because it promotes a lot of mobility in your thoracic spine. That section of your spine between the base of your neck and the bottom of your ribs. And that's where most people get stiff from just living life, from normal aging. So for this one, you can get on hands and knees, quadruped position, hands and knees. And you can I'm going to take my right arm here. I'm going to reach it underneath in that space between my leg and my other arm. And I'm going to turn into the left. Reaching that right arm through. Then I'm going to try to get as much rotation as possible to my right. I'm going to slowly open up to the right, twisting the chest, reaching out towards the ceiling, and holding it at the end. This is such a nice one. In a lot of PT programs for people with Parkinson disease, a lot of people will do training in the LSVT big program. I'm just going to do a few of these while we talk. There's a common treatment program called the LSVT big program. Probably a lot of you are familiar with that. There's another common physical therapy certification for people with Parkinson disease, which is called POWER, Parkinson Wellness Recovery. One of the keys to success in both of those programs and in general symptom management for exercise is big movements. We're doing that here. Another key is axial rotation, twisting from the trunk. And we're doing that here. So this is a nice way to kind of free up some mobility in your spine. You could do that 10 repetitions or so with one side, 10 with the other. If that feels easy, you could do more. My hope today is not as much to dose exercise for the masses, but just to give you some insight into why these things help. So we've done warrior two. We've done child pose. We've done cobra. We've done down dog. We've done thread the needle. That's a lot in just a few minutes. I want to take some time now to jump into Tai Chi with you, which is another great passion of mine. Usually we don't use mats with Tai Chi. You're certainly welcome to. Life has changed, right? So Tai Chi can be adapted for a whole lot of things, just like yoga can. I've got some Tai Chi students who sit in the chair the whole time. I've got a chair right here. As a reminder, if you needed something sturdy to hang on to, it's helpful to have something nearby. But one of the great things about Tai Chi is slow weight shifting. So we're going to do one technique today. That's it. And it's going to be tricky, but good. We're going to do a technique called brush the knee and palm strike. And the footwork for it has tremendous benefit just to start. And it's a common footwork pattern in Tai Chi. In a traditional setting, you see people out in a park running a form, a choreographed sequence of moves up and down the grass. And we do some of that, but in our group, we like to do a lot of techniques in isolation over and over because we know repetition really makes a difference in making lasting changes in the brain. One repetition we're going to work on, or one pattern we're going to repeat over and over, is stepping out. The worldwide statement in Tai Chi of I'm stepping out with this foot is first to pick up the heel. And that alone is nice because already you've just shifted your weight more onto one leg. So I got my left heel up. I'm going to step out a little bit wider than shoulder width onto the heel and try to pull the toes up. Then slowly, I'm going to shift the weight forward, flattening the feet. You can hang on to something if you need it. When you finish, hopefully that front knee is bent and the back leg's pretty straight. Here's a side view of it. And this is the kind of thing where, again, if you've got a lot of knee pain, you can just come up a bit in your stance. Or if you really want to challenge your leg strength, you can sink way down. Heck, in a lot of circles, Tai Chi is considered a form of Kung Fu. And in Kung Fu, this same stance is done down here. Oh, and I don't do as much Kung Fu anymore. That doesn't feel like it used to. But the point is, it can be applied for anybody. We're going to do that a few times here. So we're standing here minding our own business. All of a sudden, it's Tai Chi time. We're going to pick the left heel up, step out onto the heel, and slowly shift the weight forward, bending the front knee, feet flat, head up, back up. Then we're going to sit back like we're sitting on the edge of a chair, pick up the toes, and step in with good control. And that can be hard, but if you go slower, it helps to build your balance and your control and strength. Let's do it again, and we can do it with the breathing. We can take a deep breath in, and then we can step out on the heel, breathing out the whole time we flatten our feet. We can sit back, picking the toes up. We can step in. And this, you can do this over and over. Sometimes I get people who really need to hang on to something on both sides when they first start. And then over time, it's so cool to see them cut back to just using one chair for stability. And then to progress, if they can, out into just controlling it. And maybe you're already there. Tai Chi tends to have a little bit wider stances than what you saw with yoga, and that's because it's a martial art at its core. You're probably not going to fight people with Tai Chi because it's slow motion and the application of the moves is pretty tricky, but it's helpful to know that's why those stances are wide. And you could say, if you feel a little off balance, a little wobbly, take a wider step as opposed to a longer step, and you'll be more in control. So that's what we're doing with our feet in this technique, brush the knee and palm strike. There are some hand movements too. And the first hand movement, we'll just get the left hand, fingertips at nose level and midline of the chest. And this hand is the one that has the technique name, brush the knee. It's that part of the technique. So this front hand slowly clears the shoulders, drops down, clears the hips. It's a blocking motion. And then we park it by the waist with the palm down, fingertips straight ahead, and that arm just a little bit rounded. And you can see how here too, we're not hunched over, we're up tall, and we're bringing those shoulders back. So again, we can do it. Take a deep breath in. Breathe out the whole time. You do that blocking motion. Breathe in and come back up. And you say, well, how long should I breathe? And I know everybody's got different lung capacity, but I think for relaxation breathing in Tai Chi or in yoga or in Qi Gong, if you can target an inhale for a 3 or a 4 count, that's good. And if you can target an exhale for a 4 or a 5 count, you can really slow things down. So that's brush the knee. We clear the shoulders, clear the belly, we park it at the waist. Palm strike was the other part of the technique. I'm going to take the right hand here, almost like I'm holding a tray, like I'm a waiter holding a tray. And it kind of hurts your shoulder, you just drop that elbow down. But really, traditionally, you'd hold it up a little higher. We'll reach the fingertips forward, straight ahead. And then we're going to reach the arm forward. And as we're straightening that arm out in midline of the chest, we're just going to press the heel of the wrist forward a bit. So again, that palm strike, point the fingertips forward, reach and press forward. You can bring it back, point the fingertips forward, reach and press forward. If that feels simple, you can make it more of a balance challenge by adding a visual component. The eyes can follow the palm striking hand here. And that challenges another key input for balance, the vestibular system. If that feels too much or you feel like almost like seasick, don't worry about the eyes, just do the arms. But we can put the arms together now. So we've got left hand in blocking position, right arm up behind you. Front hand, what did it do earlier? It went down to brush the knee. As we're doing that, we can start reaching the back hand forward and pressing forward. And so we're trying to add harmony of movement. So the hands start together and they finish together, which builds that magic C word, coordination. And I love it because people say, I don't want to do that stuff. I'm not coordinated. But you know, you're not good at something. How do you get better? Well, you practice over and over. And that's what we'll do. Blocking position, other arm up. We're going to start, if it's too hard, you slow down. We're going to start lowering the front hand as we reach the back hand forward. And we can try to harmonize this with the breath. Take a deep breath in. And the whole time we breathe out, we'll brush the knee, and palm strike straight ahead. Again, brush the knee, and palm strike. And if you feel like, all right, I get it, I can do it, it's not that hard, good. We'll add the footwork. So we're standing here, minding our own business. We got the left hand in blocking position, right arm up. All of a sudden, it's Tai Chi time. Left heel comes up, saying, hey, world, I'm stepping out with the left. We'll step out on the heel. We got the toes up, remember? And the whole time we shift the weight, the whole time we flatten that foot, we're going to do our brush the knee and palm strike. We're coordinating it all together. Sit back and step in. And this is such a nice one because you can pick an element of it, just the hand motions, for instance. And you can repeat them over and over till you get them down. Then you can say, well, let me coordinate the hand motions with the footwork, where the foot is totally flat and the weight is totally shifted right as both hands reach their end destination. And then if that's easy, you can add the breathing, where you breathe out the whole way through and in all the way back. So that was just one side. And we got dynamic balance and weight shifting, key for people with Parkinson's to stay upright. We got improved postural awareness, because you'll notice when you come into this stance, if you're leaning, because you got a lot more weight on that front leg. You can correct it, pushing the hips forward, drawing up the spine. And we got some proprioceptive input, which is key for balance. And that I find is usually, proprioception is knowing where the body is in space. And I think with Parkinson's disease often comes a need for recalibration of proprioception, which just means practicing some of these slow movements to know, am I leaning? Oh gosh, I am. Let me get upright. Or the reason they call the big program, LSVT big, is because movements tend to be smaller from Parkinson's disease unless you bring your intentional focus to them. So we can bring a lot of focus to this motion. Brush the knee and palm strike, and it's kind of like we just high-five each other. Good job. And we've got time to just jump into one more topic quickly, which again, you could spend a lifetime on, but it's Qi Gong. So people say, well, people ask me, hey, which is best for me, yoga, Tai Chi, or Qi Gong? And I can tell you, hopefully you felt it so far, with yoga, we got a lot more motion from the spine. So if you're somebody who feels a lot of stiffness from Parkinson's disease, yoga can be more helpful. They're all helpful, but yoga can be more helpful for managing some of that stiffness. In Tai Chi, you probably felt how hard it was to control that balance and coordination. So you already know if you're somebody who feels like, gosh, my balance is off a little bit when I'm doing activities compared to how I used to feel. Well, you know, Tai Chi can be more helpful for you. Yoga can still help with balance. The Tai Chi is one of the most researched and validated forms of exercise for balance and postural control for Parkinson's. You might say, well, where does that leave Qi Gong? Qi Gong is a lot like Tai Chi, but it's a little bit simpler. And that can be beautiful because instead of trying to think, all right, well, where would my hand go if I was palm striking an attacker? You can instead think, how can I make big controlled movements and direct my thought to different parts of the body to try to feel it relax? Because Qi is thought of as life force energy. And in Eastern thought, for Tai Chi and for Qi Gong, there are blockages in the body where things become stiff and tight. And that prevents the flow of Qi through your body. So with Qi Gong, we're trying to free up some mobility and we're trying to stimulate energy travel along different meridians to try to optimize how organs function. Or, you know, if you're just thinking about the mechanical side of it, just like you'd see with a masseuse working on a trigger point, you're trying to create some flexibility in tight areas so you can move better. So for Qigong, there's so many great techniques. And a simple one starts from the world's oldest set of Qigong exercises called the 8 Pieces Brocade. I'm going to quickly show you 2 of them. We got the feet about hips width or a little wider, knees a little bit bent. We're going to try to tilt the pelvis back. So you're tilting it back. Like I'm in Texas, so I like to say if you're wearing a big old rodeo belt buckle, you'd be tilting your belt buckle up a bit towards the ceiling to round out your low back. You'll stretch the crown of the head up, shoulder blades come back and down, and this is our base posture in both Tai Chi and in Qigong. It's called Wu Qi, which means emptiness. And a lot of really traditional teachers will have you just hold this for up to an hour before they teach you anything, which is why it's really good to watch a class with a teacher before you take a class. But here we can start scooping the palms up, breathing in. We're going to scoop up towards shoulder height as we slowly breathe in. We're going to start turning the palms up towards the ceiling, reaching up as high as you can, and then breathing out as we reach out. So I feel like breathing in all the way up, reaching up, reaching out, breathing out. I feel like if you're having a period of time where you're having trouble following directions with multiple steps, for example, or if it's just hard for you to concentrate, which isn't just a Parkinson thing, but we know can be amplified by Parkinson's disease, or if you're just feeling totally overwhelmed by some of the nuances of those other 2, Qigong is probably a great place for you to start. And the reason for that is, just like you saw with those others, we're directing our focus to this big reaching motion. And instead of trying to time hands and feet and eyes and breath, we're just breathing in nice and slowly and trying to do a bigger reach than we normally would. And if the name of the game with exercise, some people say use it or lose it. And I like to say, use it and try to improve it. If that's the name of the game, well, trying to make your movements a little bit bigger than you normally would is really helpful because that can help reduce some of that stiffness that you feel also. So that's one big and simple Qigong motion. And you see how you could do that from a chair. And if you were having a day where you're in an off period with your meds or something, you're having trouble even standing, well, shoot, you could try and do some version of that, just focusing on sitting up nice and tall. And that's a beautiful thing. So, some folks that I work with are young onset and very athletic. Some are young onset and not very athletic. Some are elderly and very athletic. Some are elderly and not very athletic. But these same techniques can be modified for whatever ability you got or whatever kind of day you're having. There's another one that I've got to show you because our group loves it. A lot of people I see have a lot of tightness and aches and pains just from living life, or maybe from living life and worsened by Parkinson disease. They've got these aches in their low back. And this is not a replacement for physical therapy. I'm not saying it's a cure for low back pain. What I am saying is it's a Qigong move and it feels pretty good. So we can agree on that. We got our hands back to our rodeo belt buckle, which lines up with an energy center in the body. We're going to reach around our imaginary belt here until you get to the low back. I'm just turning so you can see. When you get to your low back, make nice tight fists with your hands. And for this one, we're going to start gently tapping the low back, tapping it away. Let me show you here. And that can help with shoulder mobility, because you normally don't reach back like this. That can help with coordination too, because you see, is one side moving as well as the other? From here, you're going to work your way down the side of your hips and down the side of the legs, just like where the seam of a pant line would be if you were wearing pants, just tapping away. And when you get to the bottom, open the palms. We're going to clap the inner part of the lower leg. We're going to start clapping onto the tops of the thighs and inner thigh as we stand up nice and tall. So again, we're getting good postural awareness, standing all the way up. We can do it again. We can reach around the low back, tapping away, and start working our way down the sides of the legs. And if you feel a tender spot, you can give it a little extra time. But this is a lot like acupressure would be for certain meridians of the body. And in an acupuncture chart, my understanding is here we'd be stimulating meridians linked with the bladder, the liver, and the kidneys. And who doesn't want a good function? So I don't know if it helps with those or not, but it sure does help for back pain to get gentle movement, flexing and extending the spine. And a lot of times, if there's tightness in your legs, or there's tightness along the path of the sciatic nerve, common for sciatica, and that's the area we're tapping, we might be able to free up some muscular tightness that's pinching on that nerve. So again, we've done just 2 Qigong movements, both from the 8 pieces brocade Qigong set. But hopefully that gave you some ideas of a couple of things you can do at home. Or if nothing else, just a nice intro to Tai Chi and Qigong. I know we want to get into some question and answer. Hopefully I didn't go too long there. If I did, I'm sorry, Katrina. I get a little carried away, but I love this stuff. So hopefully if questions have come up, I can try my best to answer them.
Great. Okay. That was awesome, Mike. Thank you so much. I only recently learned that Qigong is pronounced Qigong. So I feel like my knowledge of Qigong has gone through the roof in about a 1 week span of time. So thank you so much. We did get a couple questions. One from Amanda. Are there any yoga poses that are contraindicated? Anything you should do?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'd say, again, it's hard to be, for something as widely varying as Parkinson's disease and far-reaching as Parkinson's disease, it's hard to be terribly specific.
Okay, yeah.
But I do think if we're talking just Parkinson's symptoms, inversions, so things like headstands, things like down dog, or even things like wheel pose, which is a really exaggerated bridging movement where you're on your back, pushing your hips up towards the ceiling. That kind of thing can be problematic because if you're somebody who has really big variances in your blood pressure from changing position, it's going to make it much harder to participate in a class. So I'd say if you're somebody who notices that, gosh, I get dizzy if I stand up too fast, or if I get up from laying down too quickly, first, your movement disorder specialist or your neurologist can work in conjunction with your cardiologist to see if there's some medication changes that might be needed. And all exercise that's safe will be helpful too, to help keep that symptom from being devastating or to slow the worsening of it. But for yoga, I'd really avoid those inversions if that's you.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mike. And then the other question we got was actually from a yoga teacher asking if you have any recommendations for any type of training to help people with yoga teachers work with people with Parkinson's.
Gosh, I wish I did.
Yeah, I know. I was just trying to think the same thing. But Liz, I think I will try to do a little research and get back to you on that one.
Yeah, I'll look around too, and if I find something that looks pretty good, I'll send it to you, Katrina, to spread out. But I know it's when I was going through yoga teacher training, I too was wondering, well, this doesn't really get into many specifics for a lot of people. It's more about how do you instruct the poses, which is needed, right? But then, even somebody who might be like, it's kind of like in personal training. Some personal trainers have a whole bunch of experience and a wealth of knowledge specific to specialty populations, and some don't. And it's not their fault, it's just they just don't have the training. So how do we get them the training? Well, first it has to exist.
Yeah, that is right, Mike. That is right.
Any yoga for seniors is probably more helpful than a general yoga, simply because a lot of the motor impairments for Parkinson's are similar to those of normal aging. They're just more pronounced and more accelerated than normal aging. Along those lines, for Tai Chi, there's not yet, and I hope to eventually be able to change this, there is not yet a Parkinson Tai Chi training program. There is a pretty commonly done Tai Chi teacher training for arthritis. And a lot of that can be helpful also for Parkinson's. And some people have Parkinson Tai Chi programs. But I think a lot like with Parkinson boxing programs, or any Parkinson exercise program, I always want to look and see how they do teaching a class or leading a group and what their background is or their experience, because it's easy for a gym to market and have the best of intentions. We want to do this program for people with Parkinson's, but maybe not have any special degree of training or expertise that could, you'd like to think it would be okay, and hopefully it is, but you just want to be careful and make sure you're sticking with folks who know what they're doing.
Absolutely agree with you. And the nice thing about, we definitely want people to meet in community centers. Awesome Tribe Wellness LLC. Every time you tell me about what you guys are doing down there, I feel so grateful for all of the people that get a chance to be a part of an organization like Tribe Wellness. For those people who don't have that in their community, the nice part about some of this online stuff we're doing is that you can still take Tribe Wellness classes. And so I do recommend to people to check out Tribe Wellness LLC. I think Dr. Mike is very motivating. I'm excited to try some Tai Chi in the new year.
Yeah, come on, join us.
Yeah. Well,
Great.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, Dr. Mike. We are at the end of the hour, so I want to say to everyone, happy holidays. Thank you for joining us in 2022. I look forward to seeing you in 2023. And with that, I will let you guys go. Thank you.
Thank you all. This has been great.